part of Mercury. So today, we're going to be talking about, as you can see behind me, we're going to be talking about color psychology and we're going to be talking about the effects of that on our perception of the world. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, color psychology or color theory is essentially based on the premise that, or the theory anyway. Let's bust out the tappy marker. I already got it handy today. It's the theory that changes in the color spectrum affect states of consciousness. So, I would say affect emotion, but emotion is more one aspect of consciousness. So we'll get into that too here. So maybe we'll start off with what is on the board and then go a little bit more in depth and just expand on it as we go along. So we'll look at the three main colors here that we have on the board, and this is typically the colors that our eyes perceive: blue, green, red, and each of them are associated with certain aspects of what we perceive or of our perception. So, in turn, we can see that blue is typically associated with things like awareness, alertness, sight, consciousness. So this is really that objective state that we can remain in a state of being aware of something. So this is the same reason why at night they tell you not to look at your phone, because it produces blue light, and blue light actually makes you more alert. It tells your brain that it needs to be switched on because typically during the day, and this is pretty much the same reason why the sky is blue, is because that blue light that is coming towards us from the sun is undergoing blue shift, and that is telling our brain that it needs to be awake. It releases serotonin it releases Sera in terms of the neurotransmitters. You have serotonin and melatonin, so you can think of it as Sera wakes you up in the morning and Mel puts you to sleep. So anyway, serotonin is produced in the brain, and that tells you need to be awake, and it's a neurotransmitter, and it's the long-term content form of dopamine. So it's a long release form that is the good neurotransmitter. In essence, though, going back to just the blue light aspect, so this tells your brain that it needs to be switched on, it needs to be aware. This is the same reason in places like nightclubs, in bowling alleys, they have blue light or UV lights, or black light sometimes they're called, in that end of the spectrum, because it keeps the brain switched on. So essentially you'll want to stay there and keep active and stay alert until you're ready to go home, instead of feeling tired and like you want to go home sooner. So it gets you into that mindset of wanting to keep the party going, essentially, right? Which is, again, not always healthy when we are in the mindset or in the circumstance in which we want to go to sleep, right? So when we are attempting to go to sleep, we really want that absence of blue light. So in essence, that's the aspect of blue, and it's typically a cooler color, which we'll go into a bit more in depth in a bit. And you can see some of the aspects associated with this: calmness, clarity, relativity. So relativity meaning seeing things in relation to you, understanding what your attachment is to things, and then through your intuition, for example, you're able to notice this. Cleansing is in it's ridding the mind of blockages or overactivity or lower materiality and things that clog its sight, like subjective emotion, for example. So objectivity, another aspect of this, right? So that's really blue light. It has this aspect of having this calming effect or sensation, which is really resonant with this state of, I wouldn't say detachment, but I would say objectivity, in a sense where you can see from a third person perspective your relation to things. But with this, you don't come, you don't become as tied to the physical. Meaning, like, if you were in a state where you wanted to exercise and you wanted to be accelerated, this is not typically the type of energy that you would want. This type of energy is maybe more for intellectual endeavors or gaining insight into something, attempting to see from a third person perspective or a higher perspective. Going into green, now we get into this balanced or neutral state. Instead of being hot or cold, you have this neutrality here, which is typically based on unity, two things coming together, and I wouldn't say balancing, but I would say unifying, as in a sense where they're in between dimensions. They're in a dimension that is able to transform into all these other aspects. So, in a sense, it's easier for green light to become blue light or green light to become red light than either of these to be transformed into each other just outright. So this is a unified aspect, and it's associated with nurturing, alignment, and nurturing is in like love, support. Nurturing is in cultivating some sense of harmony inside oneself and in one's emotionality. So it's almost that aspect of emotionality where you're not too locked into it, where all you see is emotion, and you're not completely detached from it, where emotion doesn't affect you, but it's a sense where your emotions are cultivated for a higher state of progression or development. So it's an alignment with higher principalities. So there's that word principalities again when we talk about this aspect, Church of Thyatira and whatnot. I'm not going to get into that, but if you're interested in going into the Church of Principalities, look into the Book of Revelation and look into the Church of Thyatira. It is the Church of Principalities. So, nurturing, alignment within oneself, being able to maintain that state between these two extremes. Natural, as in it's more fundamental in an aspect of being. It comes from nature. Typically, when you're in nature, you feel there's almost harmony. Just being outside, or being in the sun, or being in the moonlight, or being, in the grass, or with the trees, or whatever. You feel this sense of calmness and cultivation inside yourself of these principalities and these aspects, right? So, neutral in the sense where you are, again, between these two extremes, and with that neutrality, you have this sense of almost, peaceful, tranquil, majestic essence about you. So again, this is a state where maybe you're attempting to perform some kind of state of healing, or you're unwinding from your day. This is a really good essence to have in that state, or you're attempting to just be out in the sun or enjoy yourself. This is a good state to be in, or a good central aspect to have. So it's typically occurs with it typically occurs or resonates in alignment with these aspects. Love, of course, goes hand in hand with nurturing. Acceptance, so accepting things as they are, or accepting insights which you can cultivate, but integrating them and integrating emotional aspects of lower things. So acceptance is in this form of unity of these two things coming together. So support, of course, it adds an aspect between the locked in aspect of grounding and the locked out sense of just pure awareness where you're not integrating. So support, you have this aspect of emotional nurturing where the integration is coming in. Health, because typically it is associated with healing states as well as nature. Wellness, because again, you're cultivating that sense of well-being and growth within yourself. Growth, the next one on this list, pretty self-explanatory. And soul, and I just put soul here because it's that aspect of being aligned with something in your heart and higher principalities that you set for yourself. So, red. This is, of course, the last one on here, and this is the very hot aspect in the opposite end to the cool aspect. So it's typically associated with. It typically associates with power, grounding, structure, balance. So power in a sense where you're almost you're one with that thing. You're almost unchangeable in a sense. You have a lack of ability to alter your structure or alter your perspective, and you're operating from a very almost direct state where the state that you're in is how it is and it's unchanging, which can sometimes be useful, right? If you're going to the gym, for example, this might be the state in which you want to be have utilized because you're connecting with your body at that level. You're able to tap into those emotions, which can fuel your progress, right? So grounding, structure, balance, and balance in a sense where you're standing on solid ground and you have that almost like root perspective, like a tree that is connected to the earth, right? That's type of balance. So that so some of the aspects that are associated with this are anger, which is pretty common. You know, people say, oh yeah, they see red or whatever. In essence, with you know, being in a state of high reactivity or rage, drive. So this also gives a lot of energy to that thing. So it's very energizing in a sense. Desires, and it's typically associated with lower wants and needs. Food, survival, shelter, these basic things, right? But that's also what drives your perpetuation of your existence, right? So this aspect of drive, desire, emotion in a sense where that's the very aspect that is almost it's not that like integrated aspect of emotion where it's providing growth, but it's a more raw aspect of emotion that are associated with those states like anger and like rage. And this could be any type of emotion, fear, sadness, depression, but it can also be energizing. It could be ambition, could be striving, it could be determination, right? But it is that raw form, which is not the refined form. So, it's this typical aspect where it's almost this aspect of just applying more force to get to your solution instead of operating from some refined force which has an overall equilibrium aspect to it. So emotion, subjectivity being the opposite of objectivity, where you're seeing only from your perspective and not from the third person perspective or a higher perspective. You're seeing only from your perspective, and you're continuously applying that state where you're only seeing from your perspective, and your perspective is the only one that is valid. And that is essentially the fundamental aspects of each of these colors. So, as opposition to this, where it's typically associated with this cooling aspect of calmness, you have a hot ear. So, typically, for example, when we see green, we think nature, grass, trees, things that are green, right? Typically associated with that color. And subconsciously, those things are also associated with elements like growth, right? Because obviously trees, grass, things that are connected to the earth, they grow and they flourish, and they're nurturing, and they have this aspect of cultivation. So with blue, you have this other aspect of cooling, or this aspect of slowing down, almost in a sense too, right? Where red is very energizing, blue is very cooling. It's slowing down in a sense. It's ironic because this is the longer wavelength and this is the shorter wavelength, but in essence you have that aspect there. In any case, cool. So sometimes you associate blue with things like ice, for example, which is cold, but it's funny because ice is not blue, but we associate ice more so with the color blue, because it has that cooling property to it, right? It has that cooling effect on not just the mind, but obviously the physical aspect too. So in contrast to that, you have red being associated with things like hot, so passion, fire, right? This aspect that we again talked about with almost drive and desire and fueling, energizing qualities, right? So interesting anyway. So this is the fundamental basis of color theory and color psychology, is that when you see these changes, they affect certain things, right? So in opposition to what I said earlier about when you see blue light on your phone screen at night, it keeps you up. This is why they have features to change the color spectrum of your phone more towards the red end, to allow your brain to not be as affected by that blue light, to allow you to cultivate that sense of being of drifting off to sleep, or relaxation, right? So that you can relax, so that you can cultivate the sense of allowing your brain to calm down and not be as alert, and just connect with the state of letting go of that constant alertness or need to remain aware, or should I say rather, almost this hyper-vigilant state. This is this calming, grounding state, right? In essence, so this is why they have those features on your phone that can help switch the color spectrum to the other end, so the blue light does not affect you as much, right? In essence, that is the basis of this concept. So, again, this is for more maybe intellectual aspects, self-reflection. This is for more regenerative qualities these are aspects that are associated with things like unwinding or healing oneself. And this is more associated with that state of energizing, but also grounding, and based off that subjectivity, right? So you have almost that objective and that subjective, and then you have the aspect in between, which is mainly focused on that aspect of finding that harmony or unity in between, where you can cultivate that sense of that healing that you need at the end of the day. So that is essentially what I have for you today. And again, this is why when it's during the day, the sky appears blue, and when the sun is rising in the morning, or when it's setting in the evening, when it's coming up at dawn, and when it's setting at dusk, you have that red aspect of light on the horizon, because the wavelength is being stretched. Essentially, it's hitting the atmosphere differently. In essence, though, that is what I have for you today, right here on the Sword of Mercury. And I encourage you guys to help support the channel by liking and subscribing, sharing this with friends and family who can integrate this into their life to help them with certain aspects, such as facilitating either more awareness, more unity, or more power, to essentially translate into states of, as we talked about, self-reflection, self-healing, or self-empowerment. So that is the basis of that. So they can utilize this to help them be more aware in their lifestyle and in their environment. Also remember that various corporations and businesses and elements that we see in the world that are man-made utilize these principles of psychology to influence you to make decisions in your life. So when you look at something in the business world, or something that somebody made in an advertisement, typically the colors utilized are on purpose to essentially get you to make certain decisions or feel certain ways about those things, right? So always be aware of that, and remember that these aspects are things that you can implement into your own life. They're maybe not tangible in the sense that you can reach out and touch them, but visualizing these things, or exposing yourself to certain light frequencies in the visible range can assist you with cultivating certain senses of perception or states of consciousness. So keep that in mind. Again, you can follow me on Instagram at top_sorcerer. Check out my other channel, Moonstruck, which I will link in the description below. Also, remember, I always encourage you guys to do your own research. Don't just take my word for it. I'm only here to set you guys on the path, but you guys are the ones who have to implement this to really bring that information to the fullest and bring it to life. So, yeah. Remember to like and subscribe. Again, I thank you guys so much for watching. We are almost at 300 subs, so yay! I'm very grateful for all the support I get from you guys. I love reading your guys' comments and hearing any suggestions that you guys have for future videos. So remember to comment if you have certain things that you enjoyed about this, or want to suggest topics for a future episode, or just say something that you found beneficial about watching this. And yeah, again, this is brought to you by the Prince of Mercury, right here on the Sword of Mercury. And once again, like and subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.